bold journalism,
But Drew Hernandez is a strong-minded individual.
exposing lawlessness,
Hernandez, who is ideological,
finding the truth,
and use the word Antifa.
This is what they do.
battling
They're
mainstream
liars. The woke mob, all they can do is lie.
These are the front lines.
What's going on, Thought Criminals? Welcome to Frontlines. I am your host, Drew Hernandez. I'm here with the great Alex Marlow, editor-in-chief at Breitbart at Large. I've been trying to get you on the show for a while, and I'm so thankful that you're here and we're able to talk to you. I've really been wanting to get your take from a journalistic, editorial perspective of the Twitter files and everything we've been learning about the revelations that we all knew were true, that they suppressed the Hunter Biden laptop story in collusion with the FBI, really colluding with the FBI to not only monitor a sitting U.S. president's Twitter account, deploying bots on it, and also ultimately advising that they take them down. So what are your thoughts been on the Twitter files and the revelations?
Yeah, first of all, Drew, thank you so much for having me, and congrats on all the success lately. You deserve it. You've been working really hard. I always like to see workers.
Yeah.
You got to grind it. Everyone in the audience, if you're not grinding, then you're missing out on life.
Well, thank you, because Breitbart has always helped me when I was covering all kinds, still to this day.
Absolutely.
You guys have always helped me with articles.
No,
so
it's
I appreciate
money
it.
for us. So it's too bad you spend so much time in the captain's chair. You should be out there every day, every day mixing it up.
I know, my heart is torn. My heart is torn.
Yeah,
That's why we're building a team out here on Frontlines.
Perfect. So my thoughts are, it's bittersweet for me, the Twitter files. I'm not jubilant over it because it does confirm so many years of wasted time. So much time that we were lied to, so much time that we all knew something was happening was true, and most of the establishment media would not acknowledge us. And you get numb to it after a while, and then when finally, here it is, here's the proof, everything we've been saying is true, it puts you in a rage in some ways. You're happy it's happening. I'm happy that Musk is doing what he's doing. I'm happy they're out there. We report on them robustly at Breitbart.com, and we'll continue to do that. But my excitement level is probably lower than some of the people here at America Fest. We're having this conversation. I was talking to Charlie about it. Charlie was over the moon about it.
Well, because he was mentioned in them.
Yeah, we were mentioned too, but it's
Charlie, do not amplify character.
Yeah, and there's it provides a lot of hope. It really does, because, and I just gave my speech now, and I called for people at Meta and Google to do the same, blow the whistle. Tell us about the censorship that's going on, because we know it's happening. We're experiencing it. And now we know that we're definitely not conspiracy theorists because we've got the evidence, we've got the receipts now. So I'm thrilled about it in a way, but in a way it's also, it was too long for this to happen, and it shows you that we're just at the tip of the iceberg. Twitter literally colluding with the FBI?
Yes.
I mean, it shocks no one in this audience, shocks no one in my audience, but it's still very frustrating to know that it's true, and that it's probably happening at Google and Facebook and all the other...
Absolutely, and I think the big question everybody's asking, I asked Congressman Matt Gaetz this question, and I'm saying, what is DC going to do right now? You guys, the ball's in your court.
Yes.
You got a multi-billionaire that seems willing to expose and unmask these people.
Yes.
What's the playbook? And I think there are some things behind the scenes. That's kind of the answer I got. But what would you like to see? DC kind of like move on.
Yeah, first of all,
which isn't always like, oh yay, we shouldn't get our hopes up, but
Yeah, first of all, give the next dump not to Barry Weiss. I'm not a huge fan. It's we've anointed her as the person who says obvious stuff, and we all act like it's brilliant when she says it. Like I'm over that. Give it to the people who broke the Hunter Biden laptop story. How about that? So Emma Jo Morris, who works for me at Breitbart and the New York Post, or Miranda Devine at the New York Post, they should get it. So that's my take on it. And it's funny to watch she's fighting with Musk now. So that's really funny. Yeah. But what does DC do next? The next thing DC does is probably nothing. But I think that there's some momentum ideologically, and I don't anticipate that so long as any Democrat in the White House or Democrats control any portion of our Congress, we're going to see enough that gets done. But I do think the first thing is to change the conversation, and that has been changed. But I'm really more concerned about Google. Google is the worst. Google is the one that I think is really manipulating elections more than Twitter. Twitter is a hangout for the journalistic crowd. Mostly left-wingers, by the way, so it is great to see them have to struggle with what we've struggled with in its own way. But I don't have high hopes for big tech getting addressed by the current establishment in Washington. But I will tell you, having spoken to so many people who are elected at Breitbart over the years, they do get it. They do get that it's a problem. I just don't think that there's a coherent solution that's being put forward that the Democrats will agree to. So it comes down to making progress politically to get that power to get that power to be able to get something done when a Republican gets an office again for the presidency and the Senate.
What do you think of President Trump kind of laying down his potential crackdown on big tech? He posted the video alongside the NFTs, which was kind of like, okay, well, at least there was some kind of big tech talk and solution that might be coming from his administration.
I'm glad this is on video because everyone can see me smiling about this, because it was a very funny day in the Breitbart newsroom, because he drops the NFTs, which, by the way, the NFTs have already quadrupled in value, okay? They quadrupled. They sold out right away. It was a huge success. I'm a businessman, is what I do. And it's I did love the take from this guy, Baked Alaska, who got arrested for January the 6th and said, I got arrested for an NFT salesman. I can't believe it. It's that was pretty hilarious. So, the NFTs, I don't think it's the right time for that stuff, though it's going to make money, I guess, at least in the short term. But at the same day, he releases basically an internet Bill of Rights.
Yeah, digital Bill of Rights.
And it was excellent. Mm-hmm. It was absolutely excellent. And
maybe a little 4 years too late, but at least something.
And this is where I struggle as well, because so many of the things we're talking about now, we should have been talking about in 2017. And yet, for whatever reason, we talked about Paul Ryan's attempt to overhaul Obamacare, and then whether or not we could find the money to build the wall, which we magically found in the fourth year of Trump's presidency. So you're right about this, and that's another thing that's incredibly frustrating. But I'm glad it's out. It was the most substantial policy thing I've seen from Trump in a long time. And should he win the Republican nomination, become president again, which is going to be an uphill battle, but if he's able to do the latter, is winning the nominations, certainly a possibility. But winning elections these day and age is harder than you would think. But I hope he implements it, because it's really good.
I want to get your opinion on this. Do you think that DC, the older crowd, right, is a little more delayed when it comes to understanding how influential Twitter is, or the internet is, when it comes to elections, and when it comes to, really paying attention to how powerful these tech moguls really are, lords of the universe? Do you think there is like a generational divide where they quite don't understand it? What's your opinion?
It is a huge frustration that there is this disconnect generationally. And I noticed this for the first time when I was giving a speech to a group similar to this one, and I was probably still in my 20s. I'm 36 now. And I was talking about Facebook, and it was mostly high schoolers and some early college kids in the audience. They had no idea what I was talking about. They were already off Facebook. So I hit college right when Facebook was becoming a thing. And then people move on very quickly, and it is a language, and people need to be facile with that language. They need to be fluent in that language in order to adequately represent their constituency. So people in Washington have two choices. They either need to be on these platforms, as many of them are, or they need to have people on their staff that understand them. Because one thing that's happening, particularly now with TikTok, which should be banned, of course, because it's A, Chinese mind control, and B, the Chinese are getting our data from it, from our federal government. It's on federal government property, on phones and machinery that are federal government.
And they know about it.
They know about
100%.
it. So, but you know what else is happening? The Democrats have an open space to push their values on TikTok, and we're barely even on it. I mean, a handful of us are, but and I'll tell you, we're not on Breitbart because of the Chinese mind control stuff. We don't want to be a part of it. But then what does that mean in the short term before it gets banned? And finally, we're seeing momentum for it to get banned. Before it gets banned, the Democrats have another playground for them to dominate. Yep. I was speaking, and maybe Drew, this will resonate with you in particular. I was roasting the conservative movement when I gave my speech just now about how we're not putting out material in Spanish. Soros is buying Spanish language radio stations right now.
Yep, in Florida, particularly Florida.
Right? I got a radio show on Sirius XM, it's a huge show. Breitbart, we're better than most in that we do put some of our border and cartel coverage in Spanish, but we don't do the highlights of my radio show in Spanish. We don't translate it. We don't have a Spanish language radio show. And I'm saying we're the best about it because we actually have at least some of our content in Spanish. None of our competitors are putting anything in Spanish. Soros is putting the people out there to get the left-wing values. They're going to run the table with these demographics. And the medium is the message, and so is so often the case. And I wrote a book on the media called Breaking the News, and I don't say this to plug the book. I say this because I've been thinking about this for the last few years of my life, and it's very clear to me that our values are solid. We have a lot more unity on the right than we have in my whole lifetime in terms of what we're focused on. We are not getting to enough people, and we're not getting to them because we're not as good on some social media platforms, though we're much better on others, and we're not in these other media platforms like newspapers and radio and television, and we need to continue to expand that pie. So I'm bringing this back to this conversation about do people in Washington understand the disconnect in tech? No, they don't, but I'm optimistic that some of the younger generation of conservatives do seem to get it. Josh Hawley, J.D. Vance, there's some names out there that in the latest crop of conservatives, they do appreciate it. And a lot of Democrats, they live under a rock too, so they don't really get it. But they will hire the younger people to run their account. You think Joe Biden's ever sent a tweet?
No.
Of course not. John Fetterman had an amazing Twitter account. I agreed with most of the stuff on John Fetterman's Twitter account. If I could make sense of anything he said on the campaign trail, I disagreed with it when I could understand it, which was never. But if you look at his tweets are like, bring back manufacturing, fight for the American worker. It's like, yeah, I like that stuff.
You got some kids just pushing the message because they know how it's effective. Alex Marlow, editor-in-chief at Breitbart, thank you for being on the front lines.
My pleasure.
We got about a minute left. What do you see on the horizon coming in 2024, 2023 as we end the year? And where can people follow you specifically and see more of what Breitbart is doing?
Thank you. Yeah, Breitbart.com is a place to go. I've got a podcast, Sirius XM Patriot Channel, every morning 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern, and on their app. And if you go to alexmarlow.com, you can find all my socials. The name of the game is balance, and Charlie's been hammering this with his stuff. It is. We've got the values. Our candidates are fine. They get better. They can always get better, but they're fine. It's the getting community organized, getting ready to get people motivated to master mail-in voting, master ballot harvesting, master ballot curating or curing, whatever it's called. And when we have that plan in place, then we can compete. Until we do that, we can't compete.
It's time to play their game and go on offense. I am joined by the great Andy No. Andy has been facing Antifa for years. If there's anyone that knows what it's like to go up against Antifa, expose them on a consistent basis, because a lot of people, I think they grift, they try and jump in, they cover one thing in Portland, and it's like, oh, okay, I'm an Antifa undercover journalist, and they disappear. But Andy's been at this for a while. He's been attacked multiple times, multiple death threats. Andy No, the great Andy No, is here on the front lines.
Thanks for having me on. It's I'm very honored to be here in person finally.
Well, I'm honored to have you on the show because without people like Andy, there is no front lines. I say this all the time. There's a specific select few that have really helped me get to this point, and I appreciate everything you've done. But we do have some new developments with Antifa. I wanted to talk about the WeSpa incident. Mm-hmm. There's been some recent developments. What's been going on? For people that don't know what's been going on with the WeSpa, it was a so-called trans woman that's a biological male that was trying to run around the spa with the penis hanging out, and they had a problem with it because there's little girls in there too. So Antifa decided to not just protest, but have an unlawful assembly called outside and actually assault people because they wanted to defend this psycho. But there's some stuff going on with this person.
Yeah, let's backtrack a little bit. So this is a story that basically turned into a saga that I've been working on now for essentially a year and a half. In June of 2021, there was a video that went ultra viral. You may remember there was a woman who was at a Korean spa in Los Angeles who recorded herself confronting the staff. She said things like there was a man who exposed his penis in the women's and girls section. The staff basically said there was nothing they could do, and there was this liberal lefty guy who came up and said, basically accusing the woman of transphobia. Mm-hmm. That video went ultra viral, and the way that it was covered in the press was they said that it was likely a right-wing hoax by a transphobic woman who made it up for a video clip. And the other accusation from left-wing trans activists was that even if it did happen, it's an attack on the trans woman who had a right to exist. Well, what I uncovered in September 2021 for the New York Post, I broke the story that not only was it not a hoax, LA investigators had identified a suspect who's actually a convicted sex offender and a registered sex offender in the state of California with a history of felony indecent exposure and other, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to, how explicit I can be, so I won't go into the details, but sex crimes, convicted sex crimes. And this is a suspect who had multiple felony charges now. So I broke that report. The name of that suspect is Darren Merriger. I did a second report into this person's criminal history, and I did get actually an opportunity to interview this suspect who then became a fugitive. So fast forward 15 months. Now we find out, I broke this last night, so this would be that on the 13th of December, Darren Merriger, after having been on the run for a year and a half, had been apprehended in Los Angeles and is being held currently. Bond is set at $350,000 because not only was there the Wee Spa indecent exposure case, there's another case out of West Hollywood involving the women's changing room at a swimming pool. So that is the latest update, is that finally, after 15 months, this person has now been apprehended, and this individual is legally a female, although biologically male. In the state of California, you have self-identification, meaning that you can identify with whatever gender you like and have that be reflected on your legal documents. So legally this person is female, but however, ironically, or maybe not, is currently being housed in the men's inmate facility in LA for the moment.
And part of the complaints, Andy, were that, okay, it's a spa, there's little girls in there, there's children in there, and we don't want someone walking around naked in here. But then Antifa showed up and started going crazy.
Yeah, so
how come they, I want to hear your take on this. Why do they defend people that are involved with sex crimes? They say they care so much about gay kids, or they care so much about trans kids, this kids, that kids, right? But when it comes to a child being exposed to an adult's genitalia, they care more about the so-called trans person than the actual innocence of a child. Why?
Yeah, so one thing I glossed over now in this explaining the backstory is that when that video went viral, there were some protesters who organized 2 protests outside the Wee Spa in LA, and they were violently assaulted by Antifa both times. This was in July of 2021, and law enforcement was also assaulted. The Youth Liberation Front had organized a violent direct action in addition to SoCal into Antifa. So that's the Antifa connection to this. To answer your question, why so often do Antifa end up defending people who are accused of being sex criminals or actually are? Well, it's because
over children.
They're so driven to this belief that they have to defend quote-unquote trans people that they aren't able to discern when actually there are real legitimate concerns of lack of safeguarding, particularly around children. So because they don't care about safeguarding, quite often then what happens is they do end up defending somebody who turns out to have a sex crime history. But that in some ways is emblematic of their movement. Their movement is made up of sociopaths, violent extremists, sadistic people, and quite often sex offenders as well.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, Andy, I mean, here we are 2022 with the developments with Elon Musk kind of front-manning Twitter now. We've seen prominent Antifa accounts like Chad Loader, Vish out of Los Angeles, Vishal out of Los Angeles. We've seen a lot of Antifa accounts being taken down because of the violence that they've been coordinating on the app that was allowed. Are you surprised by that? Are you surprised by this all coming out, that all these accounts were coordinating on the social media app with intelligence, with their own information? Who knows what they were doing in the DMs? Can explain to us how organized they really are or were on Twitter.
So there have been now 7 releases related to the Twitter files, and they narrowly focus on Twitter's handling of the New York Post report about Hunter Biden, the banning of former President Trump, and also the relationship between federal agencies and also their ties with the prior regime at Twitter. Now, in between that, I can sort of read between the lines and see that even though within this information release, there hasn't been specifically focusing on how content moderation applied to, let's say, the riots that happened in 2020. However, what we've learned, particularly in regards to the banning of Trump and also the temporarily restriction of the New York Post report on Hunter Biden, is that the terms of service are actually extremely flexible and is open to quite wide interpretation by the staff at Twitter. And the former head of Trust and Safety, Yoel Roth, who now he's a disgraced figure, but we've learned that he was not a fair and straight shooter at all. That in fact he had a very ideologically motivated reasoning for the decision making he had while he was at Twitter. So it remains to be seen what the decision making was around the rioting and the violent accounts.
I'd like to see that.
However, I don't think any of us would be surprised if we learned that within how the decision making was made, that they chose to not view that as a problem. And clearly they didn't, because those accounts existed.
Absolutely,
for
because
years.
they and we've seen it. I think Libs of TikTok was a perfect example of that. You saw accounts calling to firebomb her, literally to kill her, while at the same time, behind the scenes, they were claiming she was the threat. They were claiming that she was the one that was threatening LGBTQ lives, that she needed to be taken down, that she was going to get people killed. They even were trying to determine her intentions on posting certain things. So I'm actually very curious to see what the content moderation was during the 2020 riots and just exactly how extensively Antifa was functioning. That's something I definitely want to see. Andy, thank you for joining me on the front lines. Where can people follow you, your socials, and all of your great journalistic, heroic work?
Well, I'm an independent journalist who needs the support of people who like my work. Please go to andy-ngo.com.
Well, there you have it. My name is Drew Hernandez, you guys. I'll see you guys on the next one.
We must play offense. Game on.
You expect the rest of the world to live in La La Land. We're not.
We've been saying these things from day one.
Our solemn vow to you: be good, be brief, be gone.
You might find yourself changing your opinion on things you never even thought twice about. That really sets America apart.
You are not ready for season 2. This is Reloaded.
My life, tale, and my truth has been to fight socialism.
Are you familiar with structural racism?
Yeah, it's a myth.